Welcome to our channel Mindset Enhancer. In this video, we are going to know the discovery of the axis of evil. In today's only serious people afford to hear this about the discovery of the axis of evil. The application of many of the theories of modern physics to cosmology has been based on what has been called the cosmological principle. The assumptions of this principle are that the universe at the largest scale is homogeneous and isotropic, meaning that it looks essentially the same in all directions. The assumption that this principle is valid limits the number of possible models of the universe that may be proposed and excludes, for instance, a nested model in which some of its structures, such as galaxies and planets, have a certain degree of autonomy. If you are new on this channel, then please subscribe to Mindset Enhancer for your personal growth. Use of the cosmological principle has, however, simplified development of mathematical models proposed to describe the overall structure and behavior of the universe. The theories of special and general relativity, for instance, are based on this principle and have been assumed to apply uniformly everywhere. The cosmological principle has often been presented like a proven fact rather than an assumption. After watching this complete video, please share your thoughts in the comments box. I am waiting for your comment, my dear. Data are now accumulating, however, that indicate that this principle, basic to the applicability of unified field theories of physics, may not hold true. I believe that this means that we are in for a real revolution in cosmology, a revolution that is more than a paradigm shift and may come to entirely redefine what science is about. For some time now, it has been realized that the study of cosmic background radiation, or CMB for short, may serve to probe the relevance of the cosmological principle. One of the predictions from the Big Bang Theory was that the high temperatures generated at the sudden early expansion of the universe would give rise to an afterglow in the form of CMB at a few degrees above absolute zero. The detection and measurement of CMB exactly in accordance with this expectation was a very clear verification of the Big Bang Theory, and for this feat its discoverers, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, shared a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1978. The study of CMB also became the basis for projects designed to test the relevance of the assumptions of homogeneity and isotropy in the universe. If these assumptions were true, so it was argued, the temperature distribution would not display some clearly discernible directional pattern in the early universe some 15 billion years ago, and the cosmological principle could hence be considered as valid. Data from the initial satellite launched in 1989 to measure the CMB indeed only discovered minor anisotropies, irregularities, in the background radiation, which were interpreted as indicative of randomly distributed early density fluctuations that later would give rise to galaxies. Hence, no large-scale structures were discovered in these initial studies, and the CMB was still consistent with the cosmological principle. In 2003, new satellite measurements recorded the CMB by means of the so-called Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, WMAP, for which provided more accurate data from the afterglow. When this data set was analyzed mathematically, an axis and polarized fields of temperature were discovered by Swedish-American cosmologist Max Tegmark and coworkers. 6 These fields were organized somewhat like the panels of a basketball, which defined the direction of an axis through the early universe. Kate Land and João Maguejo of Oxford University later verified these findings in an article entitled The Axis of Evil. 8 This unfortunate label, with associations to President George W. Bush's foreign policy, has remained attached partly because the label is catchy and partly because the findings seem so disturbing to the foundations of established cosmology. I prefer the term central axis. As it now appears from the WMAP, the cosmos is really organized somewhat like a meatball on a toothpick, where the center of the meatball, really then what seems to be the center of the universe, is located in the direction of the constellation Virgo. 9 Curiously, the associated central axis, which exists on an unfathomably large supergalactic scale, lies in the plane of the ecliptic and has a direction parallel to the equinoxes of our own Earth's planetary orbit. 10 To give a sense of the scale of this axis, we may note that our own galaxy, the Milky Way, has a diameter of about 100,000 light-years, while the diameter of the visible universe is around 30 billion light-years. Thus, we are talking about an axis that may be roughly 1,000,000 times the size of our own Milky Way galaxy, in which our own little planet is immersed. To begin with, the cosmic microwave's background with the axis of evil. Top, the cosmic microwave background in the original image from the WMAP study. Middle, after mathematical processing of the temperature variation, a structure around the quadrupole axis becomes evident. Bottom, an octupole axis aligned with the quadrupole was discovered, which demonstrates the existence of an axis of evil. Source: NASA and the WMAP team. With permission from A. de Oliveira Costa et al., the significance of the largest scale CMB fluctuations in WMAP, Phys. Reverend D69, 2004-063516. We should be aware that these measurements of the CMB give a picture of what the universe looked like when it was only 300,000 years old, corresponding to 0.002% of its present age. This picture of the early universe is thus comparable to a photograph of a human infant 12 hours after it was born. Hence, the CMB picture shows the temperature variation in the universe essentially as it appeared at the Big Bang. Whatever structures that are apparent in this picture are inherent in our universe from its very inception. It is for this reason that these CMB studies have such a fundamental importance for our understanding of the origin and evolution of the universe, and they indicate that the universe has always contained a potentially organizing structure. Naturally, when so much is at stake regarding the basic assumptions and future of modern physics, the discovery of a central axis of the universe has been questioned. 11 studies of the axis based on other sets of data have, however, supported the validity of its existence in dramatic ways. First, it was found that the polarization of light from quasars, some of the brightest and most massive astronomical objects known, was influenced by their proximity to this central axis. 12. An interesting twist of this particular study is that the polarization corkscrewed around the axis, and its authors suggested that a potential explanation of this effect is that the entire universe rotates around this central axis. This would then be consistent with the idea that the universe as a whole is a spinning vortex generated by the axis, and that it emerged as such from the very beginning. A second, equally dramatic, finding was made by Professor Michael Longo at the University of Michigan, who studied the handedness of spiral galaxies, whether they revolved clockwise or counterclockwise, throughout the universe. He found that a line separating the preference for the two types of handedness approximately lined up with the axis previously discovered in the WMAP. 13. The axis that our own particular galaxy revolves around, as well as those of most other galaxies observed, was also found to be aligned with the central axis. Because of these recent findings, the central axis is a really exciting topic. The study of the handedness of galaxies was made independently of the WMAP study and could not have been distorted by some unknown influence from our own Earth or galaxy. Longo's study was based on a few thousand galaxies, which would normally be considered a large enough sample, and he concluded, a well-defined axis for the universe on a scale of 170 mpc would mean a small, but significant, violation of the cosmological principle and of Lorentz symmetry, and thus the underpinnings of special and general relativity. 14. Because of the serious implications of such conclusions for the future of cosmology, Kate Land made a call to the public to participate in an expanded study that measures the handedness of a large number of galaxies. Regarding the axis of evil, she stated, "It's a massive and alarming claim, which, if true, forces us to come up with a new framework for cosmology." 15. Dr. Land's claim is no exaggeration. What science has hit upon here is, I believe, one of the most consequential discoveries of all time, something that will come to profoundly change how we look upon the universe and its purpose. What I am suggesting is that the central axis is the fundamental space-time organizer of our universe. Its discovery, as we shall see throughout this book, may point out a way to recognize the universe as purposeful and endowed with a creative intelligence that in ancient times were taken for granted by most peoples on this planet. This, in turn, would mean that we for the first time would have some credible explanation as to why the universe has turned out to be organized in an orderly way. The first attempt at repeating Longo's results of a polarized handedness of galaxies, however, was reported as negative. 16. Although interpretations of this new study diverge. 17 meaning that more studies are underway to clarify this particular issue. Regardless, the central axis still stands, and if Longo is right, his data point to a universe that was polarized from the very beginning with regard to a handedness of galaxies. What is more, if the handedness and spin axis of galaxies are directly related to the central axis of the universe, this means that the formation of galaxies may not just be a result of random fluctuations causing them to rotate. The spin of the galaxies would instead be related to that of the central axis and probably emerged in resonance with this. This would mean that all the galaxies of the universe are connected to this central axis and also possibly to one another in a form of entanglement at the largest scale possible. If the different galaxies of the universe are not independent, but retain a connection to the overall polarized structure created by the central axis, this would also favor the idea that their evolution is connected and synchronized. Something that we will see later is crucial for the evolution of life. I am aware that these findings may initially seem very remote from the present everyday existence of most people, but as we shall gradually see, they will prove to have a very fundamental meaning for who we are. They create an opening toward an entirely new worldview, one where the world we live in is not seen as a result of random events and is far less fragmented and confusing than it currently seems. It is also clear from the quotes above that the findings may turn out to be very consequential for the dominating theories of physics. The theories of special and general relativity, formulated by Albert Einstein in the early 20th century, have for almost 100 years provided the general framework for cosmology. A crucial idea that relativity theory is based upon, however, is that a preferred system of reference for observing the universe does not exist. Relativity theory makes cosmological studies independent of the movement and positions of different observers. Since the central axis of the cosmos violates the cosmological principle and potentially presents a preferred system of reference, the new discoveries directly threaten the underpinnings of general and special relativity and other unified field theories of physics. It is too early to tell if this means that Einstein's equations will be invalidated, but it does mean that there are now reasons to question relativity theory as the fundamental theory of spacetime. The core discovery, however, is that the existence of the central axis shows that there was structure in the universe from its very inception, which puts the whole randomness philosophy and purported purposelessness of our universe in question. This by itself allows for the development of cosmological models in which the universe is not pointless when it comes to how life, consciousness, and intelligence have evolved. To make sense of the new discoveries and acknowledge the purposefulness of the universe, it will, however, serve us to go back to some of the earlier traditions of humankind to pick up the necessary pieces of the puzzle of the universe that have been lost along the way. This pertains especially to the cosmological tradition of the Maya. In scientific terms, what I propose here is that the central axis is a preferred system of reference and that a fundamental spacetime theory of the universe needs to be based on this very axis in order for an evolutionary theory to make sense. The new Big Bang Theory and Hunab-Ku, the axis of evil of modern science, is the tree of life. Of the ancients, the hypothesis that will be developed in this book is that the central axis that modern cosmologists have now uncovered is the cosmic world tree, the Hunab-Ku of Mayan cosmology, which in the Jewish tradition is known as the tree of life, and that all of evolution emanates from this. In Viking mythology, a world tree, Yggdrasil, was seen as the center of the universe, which connected its 9 worlds. In Mayan language, Hunab-Ku literally means the one Lord, Hunahau, who is mostly described as the one giver of movement and measure, or the one giver of energy and boundaries. As is apparent from the Mayan tree of life symbol shown here, its most marked features are a separation between light and darkness, a yin/yang polarity, and a spiraling or corkscrewing movement. That such a center of the cosmos indeed exists is described by Mayan cosmology, and I have elaborated on this in both of my previous books. 18, although at the time of their writing there was no empirical evidence at hand to demonstrate the existence of such a central axis. I propose that the evolution of life and consciousness can be understood if we look at the universe as a hierarchical organization of halos generated by spinning trees of life, ranging from the level of the universe in its totality down to the elementary particles. I am intentionally retaining the term tree of life for the central cosmic axis, although this is laden with mythological meaning and may sound archaic. This is mainly because the phenomenon could easily be trivialized or seen as merely material if it is given a name from the terminology of modern physics. The use of the term tree of life reflects the knowledge that the ancients had of this axis, a concept of an unfathomably large tree, presumably based on inner visions, that created life in all of its aspects. This tree we may get an idea about from old Mayan representations, and one way of visualizing the tree of life is that from its center, the so-called Yaxkin. 3 perpendicular axes emerged that through their vibrations created a universe in 3 dimensions. The tree of life also created the 4 directions locally on Earth from the polar axis that were reflections of the 3 dimensions of length, width, and depth on the cosmic level. Its 3 axes are thus the boundaries, or measures, provided by Hunab-Ku. The tree of life also created periods of time as well as the human beings and all animals and plants of the world. Hence, it was often portrayed with representations of maize and human heads coming out of its branches, and it was seen as the central creative principle of the universe, the creator of all life. As a matter of terminology, I will refer to the central axis of Hunab-Ku as the cosmic tree of life and the sphere that surrounds its polarized field as its halo, which is dominated by yin/yang polarity. What makes the suggestion that the central axis of the universe is the tree of life of the Maya scientifically meaningful is, as we shall see, that it is a testable hypothesis and not a statement of faith. The reason for this is that the Mayan calendar provides a description of the rhythms of creative energies emanating from this hypothetical tree of life, and so it is testable to what extent the actual rhythms of evolution conform to the time plan that this calendar specifies. Thus, although we are testing the hypothesis that the central axis is a manifestation of the Mayan One Lord, which may seem like anathema to many professional scientists, we will do so by means of empirical science. If the evolutionary processes can be convincingly shown to adhere to the rhythms of the Mayan calendar, we will have to conclude that they emanate from the now discovered central axis of the universe, and that this is indeed what the ancients called the tree of life. If this is true, then the tree of life is not, as sometimes has been thought in recent centuries, merely a symbolic or mythological concept, but something very real that has enormous consequences for our view of the origin of the world and of ourselves. Even if it may to some initially sound outrageous that the tree of life actually is real, there is something that speaks very strongly in favor of such an existence. This is that the notion of a world tree, sometimes with a snake or a dragon whirling up and down it, may be related to the corkscrewing of the polarized light from nearby quasars mentioned above. In ancient times was the most widespread myth among the peoples of the earth. We know of the existence of this myth from the Norse to the Hindus and from the Maya to the Maori. It is part of the lore of the Sand people of the Kalahari Desert, arguably the oldest existing culture on Earth. For Westerners, the most well-known description of the world tree is, however, the tree of life in the Jewish creation story in Genesis. The tree of life plays an equally important role as the very foundation of creation in the Icelandic sagas and the Popol Vuh of the Maya. Sometimes, special trees, actual living green trees, serve as symbols for the tree of life, like the kauri tree of New Zealand, the ash in Scandinavia, or the ceiba in Guatemala. In other cases, the representations of the world tree are more symbolic and reflective of spiritual energies, such as the Kabbalah tree, the medicine wheel of American Indians, or Svetovid of the Slavic peoples. It is clear from the myths of the Maya and the Vikings that the tree of life was believed to exist on an immense cosmic scale. If the tree of life was a mere superstition or an abstract symbol without any real manifestation, it is difficult to understand why the idea of its existence would have become so widespread among so many and widely different cultures of our planet. In Mayan cosmology, Hunab-Ku imposes polarized fields on the universe, creates coherent organizations of life on different levels, and maintains their synchrony according to the principle of as above, so below. In the hierarchical organization of life that Hunab-Ku creates, the boundaries and energies of the microcosms are ultimately defined by the microcosms in a way that, in line with the great thinker Arthur Koestler, could be called holonomic. This means that the universe is formed as a nested hierarchy of holons, structures that are whole in themselves and yet interconnected. The model that will be developed here also borrows from the holographic model of David Bohm and Carl Pribram, according to which the universe we perceive is a product of interference patterns of waveforms that provide an implicate order for the cosmos. 19. What to me, however, seems to be missing for the holographic model to become tangible is an understanding of the source of these waveforms and how they may have generated an orderly universe. What I will be proposing here is that the source of these waveforms is the central axis, or cosmic tree of life, which creates a nested hierarchy of holons, or organizations of life that are microcosmic reflections of the central axis. To avoid confounding the present theory with earlier models that I have not fully described, I prefer to talk about the universe as holographic, since there is much data to indicate that the holons are formed by halos generated by spinning trees of life at different levels of the universe. In this model, the higher macrocosmic levels of life in the universe, created by the trees of life on their respective levels, are senior to the microcosmic levels. The latter are, however, not merely identical copies of the former, reduced in size. Each lower level instead defines a distinct level of organization with unique characteristics within the framework provided by a higher level. The origin and evolution of life cannot in this model be understood by studying it only from below, from an understanding of molecules, electrons, or strings, in other words, by a reductionist approach. Ultimately, we need an understanding of the highest, all-encompassing, cosmic level of the tree of life that appeared at the Big Bang. In the view of the ancient Maya, the tree of life, or heart of heaven, was the creator of everything, even though it may have needed to be activated by Hunab-Ku, or the one God, in the beyond. Before time existed, there was only the incomprehensible divinity of Hunab-Ku permeating the heart of heaven, which slumbered for 7 eternities. Then by the power of his word, Hunab-Ku thrilled the heart of heaven. 20. Considering that a central axis has now been discovered, which existed from the very beginning of the universe, it is warranted to propose a new Big Bang theory consistent with this creation story. In this, the tree of life is not seen as a manifestation of the Big Bang. Instead, the Big Bang was a manifestation of the creation emanating from the tree of life. Thus I will speak about the tree of life as a Platonic form, which means that it has a geometric existence that is prior to and beyond any physical manifestation. The fact that the universe seems to have had a tree of life structure from the outset is clearly consistent with the interpretation that our universe was designed by an intelligence. Although to mention this may mean breaking a taboo in science, there is nothing in the physics of the Big Bang theory that contradicts this. The central axis will here be seen as a creative source that introduces yin/yang polarities of creation, and its identification as the cosmic tree of life will have wide-ranging ramifications for how we may understand not only the Big Bang, but even more so the continued evolution of life in the universe. What I proposed with this new Big Bang theory is that as the Yakskin, the center of the cosmic tree of life, grew to a certain size in the original fireball, it started to separate out the 4 forces of nature and created a polarization that pervaded the cosmos, which later, when the galaxies started to develop, presumably determined their handedness. After 10 to 35 seconds, 3 axes emerged from the Yakskin, which gave rise to the inflationary phase that expanded the volume of the universe some 10 to 100 times, or, in other words, the 3 axes developed from the central point into a creative coordinate system, including the central axis, so that the 3 basic dimensions of space came into existence. In a rapid sequential expansion, tree of life halos at lower levels of organization, also with 3-dimensional coordinate systems, were generated throughout the cosmos and contributed to this inflationary phase through their own expansion. These halos at different organizational levels emerged in a certain specific order, with those at a lower level inside those at a higher. Thus, the cosmic tree of life initially gave rise to seeds of galactic trees of life that developed into galactic coordinate systems and provided the primordial coordinate system for the later development of galactic vortices. Within each galactic tree of life, in turn, star system trees of life were seeded, which are subordinated to, and in resonance with, the galactic level, thus ensuring that the star systems are integrated into the organization of the galaxy that seeded them. In this way, seeds are planted for trees of life at lower levels of organization, which are always subordinated to their next higher holonomic levels. This ensures coherence, ranging from star systems to planets, organisms, cells, and elementary particles, according to a seniority rule, as above, so below, where microcosms develop within the framework of macrocosms. Ultimately, the trees of life in this model are all subordinated to the cosmic tree of life at the largest scale of the universe. When the inflationary phase of the universe was over at 10 to 32 seconds, the universe was filled with electrons at one of the lowest levels of this chain of unfolding trees of life. The inflationary phase of the universe was completed when the dimensions of the universe and the seeds of lower-level trees of life had all been introduced in an organized way. From its very largest scale to the smallest, the different levels of the universe are connected through the holographic resonance of these creative coordinate systems, a setup that allows for its coordinated evolution and overall coherence, and does not hinge on any precarious random processes. In this model, it is the cosmic tree of life that gives our universe its 3 dimensions of space, something whose origin has not been explained in any previous Big Bang theory. It is not trivial or in any sense self-evident that our universe has 3 dimensions of space, since in principle the primordial fireball could have developed into any number of dimensions, and theories proposing exotic numbers of dimensions have been proposed. Yet such theories are inconsistent with our everyday experience as human beings, in which it is 3 dimensions of space that we really experience, and it may be that it is only in a 3-dimensional universe that life can emerge. This explanation was suggested in 1955 by Whitrow, who among other things put forth that 3 dimensions of space are a necessary prerequisite for a chemistry-based life. 21 more recently, Martin Rees has in just 6 numbers made a renewed case that 3 dimensions are necessary for the emergence of life, since in a universe with more than 3 dimensions of space, planetary orbits would be destabilized. Against a universe with 2 or 1 dimensions, he argues, it is impossible to have a complicated network without wires crossing, nor can an object have a channel through it, a digestive tract, for instance, without dividing into 2. And the scope is still more constricted in a 1-dimensional line land. 22, it seems, in other words, as if 3 dimensions of space are a necessary prerequisite for our existence. To my knowledge, the tree of life hypothesis is the only one that has ever been proposed to explain why the universe has exactly this number of dimensions. In conventional science, quantum events are limited to the micro-world. Here we will, however, look upon the emergence of the 3-dimensional cosmic tree of life as the primordial quantum event. To say that this was a quantum event means only that it happened without intermediate states. As all quantum events, it just happened and resulted in a discrete state of the cosmic tree of life and the lower levels entangled with it. In Chapter 6, we will develop this vision of the cosmic origin more fully, and evidence will be provided that quantum events occur in the universe also at a macro scale. At the end of the inflationary phase, 10 to 32 seconds after the Big Bang, there were, of course, no ready galaxies, not to mention planets, animals, or plants, but in the tree of life hypothesis, the seeds for the emergence of all these things had been planted in the lower-level halos surrounding lesser trees of life. In this view, the evolution of life begins with the Big Bang, rather than suddenly popping up by accident 3.8 billion years ago on Earth. Life was seeded from the very beginning, when the life-generating cosmic tree of life created an expansion of low-level halos throughout the universe. In the view presented here, the universe emerged with the very purpose of generating life, and this purpose started to manifest from its inception. It is this evolution of life that, as we will see, takes place according to the rhythm provided by the Mayan calendar. It should now be pointed out that the Mayan calendar is not an astronomical calendar in the usual sense of the word, but is rather a reflection of creative pulses emanating from the tree of life. The Mayan calendar is thus an expression of the time factor in creation and evolution. Not only space, but also time was generated by the tree of life, the one giver of energy and boundaries, which in my new theory is the fundamental source of space-time. In this new scenario, the Big Bang is not an explosion in which matter emerges out of nothing in random ways. Rather, it is an expansive, or inflationary, stage-setting organizational event, in which the cosmic tree of life and its halos define the spins at different levels of the universe, making the energy already existing in the quantum vacuum materialize as matter in the form of particles and objects with clearly defined properties. The existence of such an underlying energy field is fairly universally recognized by physicists. 23 Here we will focus on the evolution of the physical reality that has emerged from it. This new Big Bang scenario, unlike the old, can explain why a central axis has pervaded the universe from its very outset, as well as why an inflationary phase in 3 dimensions took place shortly after the beginning. Unlike the old theory, the new Big Bang theory explains how an ordered heterogeneous universe came into existence from a hierarchical organization of halos, or wave forms, generating the seeds of structures from galaxies down to electrons. It also provides a background to the many observations that the universe is fine-tuned for the emergence of life. The physical constants of the universe fine-tuned for the generation of life. The time points I have used above in the new Big Bang scenario have been taken straight from the old Big Bang scenario and are based on estimates of the original rate of expansion of the universe. Like the three-dimensionality of the universe, this rate of expansion and its relationship to the opposing force of gravitation is one of many examples showing that the basic features of this universe seem to have been remarkably fine-tuned for the generation of life from the very outset. If this initial rate of expansion had been only slightly smaller, the universe would have collapsed back on itself shortly after the Big Bang. Stephen Hawking has estimated that if the rate of expansion, at the time when the universe was 10 degrees Kelvin, had been just 1 part in a trillion less than what it actually was, the universe would have collapsed on itself a long time ago. 24 If, on the other hand, the rate of expansion had been higher, matter would have been so dispersed that galaxies, solar systems, or planets would never have been able to form. Either way, no life would have emerged in the universe. Thus, the initial rate of expansion of the universe, presumably determined by the rate of expansion of the cosmic tree of life, is a critical factor that the emergence of life hinges on. Other basic constants of nature also have been critical for defining the way our universe looks and has developed, and these have been discussed by Martin Rees. 25 Some of these constants express the strengths of 4 basic forces of nature, such as m, the electromagnetic interaction, alpha g, gravitation, alpha w, the weak force, and alpha, the strong force. The emergence of life in the universe is directly dependent on these constants being within a very narrow range of the values that they actually have. For those who believe that life is an accident, it has obviously presented a challenge to explain the preciseness of these values, and so far no unified theory has been provided to account for this. For instance, if the constant, alpha, the strong force, which causes the attraction between different protons and neutrons in the nuclei of atoms, had the value 0.006 rather than 0.007, then a proton would not be bonded strongly enough to a neutron. In a universe with the lower of these constants, helium and all the elements necessary for life, including carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, could not be formed. 26 The only type of atom that would exist in such a hypothetical universe is hydrogen, which has only 1 proton in its atomic nucleus, and since in such a universe hydrogen would not be able to fuse to generate helium, there would be no stars generating heat and light, which as a consequence would preclude the emergence of life. If in another hypothetical universe the constant was higher, 0.008, 2 protons would attract one another so strongly that all hydrogen would rapidly form higher elements, and thus disappear at such an early point that there would not remain any fuel for the stars in this universe either. All carbon would rapidly burn to oxygen, and then go on to create metals at a rate that would preclude life. In another example, if the number alpha g/m, the relative strengths of gravity and electromagnetism in the universe, was a little bit higher, galaxies would form much more readily and stars would have much shorter distances from one another than in our current universe. As a result, encounters between different star systems in the galaxy would be much more frequent and create constant disturbances on the planetary orbits, and so pose grave threats to life everywhere. What is more, the strong gravity in such a universe would give rise to stars with much larger masses than is now the case, and as a consequence they would have much shorter lifespans, maybe on average 10,000 years rather than about 10 billion years, which is estimated for our own Sunday. Such shorter lifetimes of stars would likely not provide enough time for the evolution of life. For our existence, we are very dependent on having a strength of the force of gravitation that is very close to what it actually is in our universe. One night stands in awe of the exactness of any single one of these constants of nature and how they seem to have been perfectly attuned for the generation of life. Our existence has in a very real sense narrowly depended on a set of basic constants of nature having close to exactly the values that they do. Yet our existence does not just depend on all of these constants having the right values one by one. It depends on all of them being exactly right in combination. One cosmologist, Lee Smolin, estimates that the probability of all these constants of nature together having values that allow for the emergence of our kind of life is as low as 1 in 10^220, a number that is greater than the total number of atoms in the universe. 27. How do scientists look upon this fine-tuning of the universe for the emergence of life? Well, some believe that the universe is a product of blind laws of nature that link the different constants in a way that we have yet to understand. Others, however, embrace some form of what is called the anthropic principle to explain this fine-tuning. The weak form of this principle says that the universe must be life-friendly, since it happens to be inhabited by living observers like ourselves. In the strong form, on the other hand, which is embraced by only a minority of physicists, the anthropic principle states that the emergence of life is inevitable given the values of the basic constants of nature. 28. What I will advocate here is yet another form, which with such standards would have to be referred to as the super-strong anthropic principle. The purpose of the universe is to generate life, and its physical nature is entirely subordinated to this purpose. I will, however, call this the common-sense anthropic principle, since it is hard to see that there would be something extreme about postulating that life is not an accident. Such basic principles of science play important roles for how cosmological investigations turn out, and naturally the output of these reflect their input. In science, the intention of an investigator also plays a significant role in what questions are asked and what answers are found, and a basic principle of science may allow for solving a problem simply by providing a new context. The theory of everything and the organizational hierarchy of life ever since Isaac Newton formulated his theory of gravitation in Principia in 1687. Physics has been perceived as the most fundamental of the sciences and has set a standard that the others have sought to emulate. Newton's theory has in fact proven to be very exact in predicting the mechanics within the solar system, and with regard to the cosmological principle, it has thus been assumed to be valid always and everywhere. Based on this success, physicists have worked in the last 3 centuries to develop field theories for other forces that would be valid always and everywhere throughout the universe, and this work has provided our understanding for, among other things, the 4 forces of nature. It has turned out, however, to be an insurmountable challenge to develop unified field theories that are applicable on several different levels of the universe, which would amount to the fulfillment of the dream of the realization of the theory of everything that many physicists aspire to. Hence, while Newtonian mechanics seems to provide a near-perfect mathematical description of the movements of matter at the level of the solar system, it does not seem to do so at the level of elementary particles. The behavior of elementary particles is instead best described by quantum mechanics, which it has not been possible to unify with relativity theory. To complicate the unification of the different theories further, the existence of very high proportions of dark matter and dark energy has had to be inferred to explain the observed movements of matter on the galactic and universal levels. Without very significant modifications, Newtonian mechanics is not applicable either on the subatomic level or on the galactic, and is only directly applicable on the level where it was first discovered, namely that of the solar system. Despite the fact that many physicists for some time have claimed that a unified theory of everything is just around the corner, the formulation of one has not yet happened. And I think there are reasons to ask if there could be something fundamentally flawed with the basic assumptions under which science is operating. In the new Big Bang theory proposed above, it was suggested that the initial rate of expansion of the universe and its early inflationary phase were caused by the emergence of the cosmic tree of life with its axes in 3 directions. On my own part, I thus believe that it is only with such a fundamental space-time organizer of the universe that is Platonic in nature can the enigmatic fine-tuning of the constants of nature be explained. The cosmic tree of life provides the context for the universe to generate life. In such a context, it would make perfect sense that the constant expressing the initial rate of expansion of the universe has exactly the value that it does, simply because this is the one that is conducive to life. From such a context, it would also be necessary for the forces of nature to have the particular strengths that they do, and so within such a context it would well be possible to formulate a theory of everything. In established science, no such context is postulated for the various laws, constants, and forces of nature, and for this reason it cannot explain the coherence of the universe. Instead, the laws of nature are thought of as if they had come into existence more or less by accident, and so it is no wonder that a science based on such assumptions has failed to formulate a unified theory of everything. To be able to formulate such a unified theory, it is necessary to have a view of the universe in which laws are expressions of a unified, purposeful context, and if the existence of such a context is denied, then it is only logical that it cannot be formulated. If we accept the common sense anthropic principle that the purpose of the universe is to generate life, then it may also be argued that a necessary approach to a complete theory is one of systems theory. What I am suggesting here is that in order for life to emerge in a universe, the universe needs an organized hierarchy of different levels that have distinct and separate roles in the life-generating process. To fulfill these roles, each of these organizational levels needs to retain a certain level of autonomy. If we accept that the physical laws of the universe are subordinated to its purpose of generating life, maybe laws equally applicable at all its different levels in fact could not exist, and that different laws by necessity would have to apply to elementary particles and galaxies. Moreover, structures at each of these organizational levels need to be defined by halos and dominated by different mechanical laws to keep the universe from falling back into a homogeneous, disorganized state, which would preclude the emergence of life. If we accept that the overall context for the evolution of the universe is provided by the cosmic tree of life, then it is not so difficult to accept that the contexts for lower-level systems in the universe are similarly provided by lower-level trees of life with their associated halos. The primary systems, or organizational levels, generating the context for life in the holographic universe are 1. The universe, 2. The galaxy, 3. The solar system, 4. The planet, 5. The biological organism, 6. The cell, and 7. The atom. A well-known example of one such life-organizing system is planet Earth as described in the Gaia hypothesis, a system in which homeostatic mechanisms, seemingly controlled by feedback loops, ensure the stability of the conditions for life. All of these organizational levels rotate around trees of life, except the organism, which are generated by halos that create open spherical systems. All of them also have conspicuous, very dense centers, such as the black hole in the galactic center, the cores of the sun and the Earth, and the nucleus of the atom. Presumably, there is also such a core in the center of the universe. These organizations of life on different levels are also, as we shall see in Chapter 6, entangled. This entanglement between different halos ultimately goes back to the birth of the different levels of trees of life in the inflationary phase that followed upon the Big Bang. The cosmic tree of life in 3 dimensions notably is directly reflected also at the lowest atomic level through the perpendicular electron clouds called orbitals. I think that it is possible to make the case that without such a hierarchical organization, where each level operates according to rules of its own and has a certain autonomy, life would not have emerged anywhere in the universe. In fact, the relationships between these different hierarchically organized halos seem to have been fine-tuned, from the universe in its entirety down to the elementary particles, in order for life to emerge. The generation of life thus mandates that the universe be heterogeneous from the very beginning and operate according to different sets of rules on different hierarchical levels, which allows them to maintain their autonomy. If, for instance, stars were not organized in galaxies, the higher elements, such as oxygen, carbon, and metals, would not have become available for the formation of planetary systems in which life could evolve. If planets like our own Earth were not organized into star systems, they would not have been provided with a sustained source of light and heat that is necessary for the emergence of life. If biological organisms did not live within planetary ecosystems, where the basic elements and nutrients are circulated through the oceans and atmosphere, they would not survive. The emergence of life in the universe critically depends on the existence of a hierarchy of organizational levels where the material exchanged between them is narrowly defined. The reason that Newtonian mechanics, or any form of mechanics for that matter, is not applicable both at the microscopic quantum level and the macroscopic galactic level, at least not without very serious qualifications such as the assumption of dark matter, may be that this would not be consistent with the common-sense anthropic principle. For life to emerge, matter needs to be organized independently at each level, and the organization at different levels need to be coordinated and operate according to different mechanical laws. If, for example, the atomic world was not formed by electron clouds in accordance with the rules of quantum theory, in this case orbital theory, a range of distinct chemical elements would not be formed and there would be no life. If, on the other hand, our own level of existence was dominated by such electron clouds, it would be very intangible. What I am suggesting is that the nested hierarchy of the universe allows for the emergence of autonomous life forms because different physical laws dominate the different levels. After all, to have relative autonomy versus the environment is a fundamental characteristic of a living organism, and maybe the whole universe requires similar autonomy. It is quite possible that many physicists would disagree with me about this, based on their expert knowledge of their respective specialized fields. The point to realize, however, is how profound the influence of the basic assumptions of science is on the direction it takes. The researcher who believes that physical laws principally determine the evolution of the universe, and that the emergence of life is an accidental byproduct of these laws, will naturally seek to unify the laws of the universe without consideration to the nested hierarchy of systems that is necessary for the generation of life. A researcher like myself, however, who sees the creation of life as the primary purpose of the universe and regards all the physical laws as subordinated to this end, will, on the other hand, regard each of its levels as to some extent autonomous and study how the particular mechanical laws that apply on each level have served the emergence of life. The two different approaches will lead the researcher in two very different directions, and it is not possible to go in both directions at the same time. A choice of approach has to be made. What is proposed here is that the existence of a nested hierarchy of systems is a necessary prerequisite for a universe to be able to generate life. The relationships between these systems need to be taken into account in any true theory of everything. Even though there is a relative autonomy of the different levels of organization of life, these are in the theory presented here also entangled and in resonance with each other. The alignment of galactic spins with the central axis is one example. The holographic resonance between biological organisms, planets, and galaxies is another, and this will be discussed in Chapter 6. The holographic resonance of human beings with the planet has been extensively described, 29, and there is no doubt as to the reality of this phenomenon. Such instances of holographic resonance are among the most fascinating aspects of how the universe functions. Such resonance is behind all spiritual guidance, including premonitions and dreams. I am convinced that if we are to understand how the universe is created and evolves, science needs to focus on the study of how the different structures at different levels of the universe are entangled, and how this entanglement serves the generation of life. In this chapter, we have seen how the cosmic tree of life is the fundamental organizer of three-dimensional space in this universe. That indeed such an organizing principle exists, I find infinitely more intuitively attractive than the current paradigm of science, which proposes that the evolution of the universe and its biological organisms is a result of a number of natural laws that exist without any context. Here we have now discovered the spatial context provided by the tree of life. Evolution is, however, also fundamentally related to time, and when studying evolution, it is equally important to understand how the cosmic tree of life organizes time. Generally speaking, time is to modern people a more mysterious phenomenon than space, and to understand it, we will need some guidance from the past. Part 2. The two aspects of time. If we look at the various constants that, according to modern physics, broadly define the nature of our universe, such as the 6 numbers given by Martin Rees, we may notice that something is conspicuously absent among them. They do not include any constant of time. Even though it is widely recognized that the universe has evolved, or at least changed, over time, demonstrating certain patterns from the Big Bang to the present time. No constant expression of the rate of this evolutionary process has been included as a primary characteristic of our universe. The absence of a constant of time, or a rate of change, in fact probably reflects how confused we modern humans are when it comes to understanding the nature of time. To understand time, we may first consider that the ancient Greeks recognized two aspects of time, chronos and kairos, where chronos meant quantitative, measurable time, and kairos was the right time, qualitatively speaking. One chronos could be measured by comparisons with mechanical devices and astronomical cycles, whereas kairos was perceived only at certain critical instances as an opportunity or a crisis, as if some evolutionary process was trying to force itself into existence at that very point in time. This was then considered as the right time. Kairos thus expresses when something is in the air and about to happen, and without an understanding of its relationship to evolution, it is usually experienced as a magical, or at least subjective, aspect of time. Kairos, or evolutionary time, is however the aspect of time that gives us the actual experience of time as something more than just a series of discrete, unrelated moments. Most of us recognize experiences related to kairos, for instance in so-called synchronicities, a term coined by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung to describe remarkable coincidences that statistically speaking would be extremely unlikely. Officially, the modern world recognizes only the chronos aspect of time. Many are in fact infatuated with this quantitative time and with always doing things as quickly as possible. We are obsessed with time in the sense of this measurable mechanical time, and we honor athletes who are the fastest in their respective sports and tend to favor cars that can accelerate to a certain speed in the shortest time possible. We appreciate computers that can accomplish a task in the shortest possible time because this saves time, and yet, because of this emphasis on chronos, many people today are stressed out because they do not have enough time. Often those who are the most into saving time are in fact also those who have the least time at their disposal. Mechanical cycles are used to make quantitative determinations of what is too little, enough, or too much time, and ultimately mechanical time is measured against some astronomical cycle in our local solar system, such as the revolution of the Earth around the Sun, the year, or the Moon around the Earth, the month. Modern physics has become very adept at working with the chronos aspect of time, and its standard unit, the second, is today defined by atomic vibrations. Yet since the modern world recognizes only the measurable aspect of time, whenever we are part of remarkable coincidences, we tend to regard them as mysterious. In fact, such remarkable coincidences often turn out to be the defining moments of life that serve to guide its future direction. Indeed, the reason many place so much weight on such events is, as we shall see, that they stem from a higher evolutionary aspect of time, kairos, instead of the common measurable aspect. The two separate aspects of time also account for why time often seems like an area where our measurements and experience diverge. Time flies when you are having fun. The divergence stems from the fact that most people would probably deny the kairos aspect of time or look upon it as something merely subjective that has its origin in the human psyche. With society's emphasis on the chronos aspect of time, many look upon synchronicities, she called just when I was thinking of her, as something out of the ordinary whose existence they do not understand. In general, we look upon time as something clearly more mysterious than the three dimensions of space, and many aspects of time and timing have become blind spots in our modern civilization mainly because we have denied the very existence of kairos. Kairos expresses the timing of the cosmos, and obviously whenever we are part of this we have reasons to acknowledge that we are part of a higher purpose. The denial of kairos, the evolutionary timing of the cosmos, helps explain why modern physics has not included a constant of time in its most basic description of the universe. Mechanical cycles upon which quantitative time is based cannot serve as true constants of nature since they change over time. The year and the month, for instance, upon which most calendars are based, have had a meaning only for the past 5 billion years or so. Before this time, the solar system had not even come into existence, and its cycles have varied considerably in duration since it did. Yet the evolution of the universe has happened, in time, ever since the Big Bang, and we may ask if there is not any way that we could quantitatively express the speed of this process. Even if Kairos has always been perceived as something subjective or even magical, there's a way of looking at this aspect of time as an expression of the overall evolutionary rate of the universe at any given time. The right time would then be when such an evolutionary opportunity forces itself into existence, even if this may be experienced very subjectively. What is suggested here is that the reason that such evolutionary opportunities turn up to begin with is that some objective, yet invisible, factor drives these opportunities to manifest themselves at the right time. This factor would then have to be monitored as evolutionary right time rather than as mechanical time. As examples of such cosmic timing of evolutionary opportunities, we may take the relatively frequent independent and simultaneous discoveries in science, as well as technology, like those of Leibniz and Newton of calculus or Bell and Gray of the telephone. Asterisk 2, if we do not want to look upon such synchronicities as mere curiosities, we have to conclude that some factor exists that serves to synchronize events in the universe and has quite some defining power over our lives. Another good example of this synchronizing power of Kairos is the Big Bang, the primordial synchronizing event, which all other events in evolutionary history go back to, when in less than a minute the four basic forces of nature, energy, matter, three-dimensional space, and time all came into existence. Few physicists have stopped to consider the amazing fact that all of these phenomena actually emerged in synchrony in the Big Bang. If the universe had no purpose or intelligence, these different things might just as well have appeared at random moments spread out over a long period of time to create an incoherent universe, but instead their emergence was synchronized and coordinated. All evolutionary time goes back to the synchronized initial event, but the mechanical cycles and the chronos measurable time based on them are in fact secondary phenomena coming into existence much later. Astronomy, biology, and geology are, as we shall see, examples of how different phenomena emerged at the same time in a synchronized way to provide the conditions for life. And this would not have been possible if all evolution did not go back to the same starting point. To accept such a synchronizing factor behind evolution is not necessarily easy for modern people, who mostly only follow mechanical time and regard everything else as anomalies. Yet it does seem clear that the Greeks saw it differently. A people who saw time even more differently from the modern world were the ancient Maya, who not only recognized the existence of synchronicities in many different ways on their steles, but actually even developed a calendar system that was designed to chart Kairos, or evolutionary time, as this emanated from the Tree of Life. It is because they charted this other aspect of time that I believe it is imperative to make the Mayan calendar system part of any attempt to develop a new and truer theory of the evolution of the universe. In the Mayan view, time had its origin in the Tree of Life, whose time was what their calendar system was designed to chart. By looking at the Mayan calendar system, we will come to understand that the universal process of evolution was initiated through the synchronizing power of the Tree of Life at the Big Bang, but also that this synchronizing power would be manifested at many later points as well to maintain the direction of evolution. From this, we will be able to conclude that the Tree of Life is not only the organizer of space, but also of time, and the empirical evidence for this will be provided as we go along. If the creative pulses of the Tree of Life are correlated with mechanical time, this Kairos aspect of time emanating from the cosmic Tree of Life can be followed by calendars. And this correlation is what the Mayan calendar priests would devote great efforts to bring about. Even though the ancient Greeks, unlike modern people, recognized both aspects of time, they never developed a calendar system with which the two could be followed in parallel. To have done so is the unique contribution of the Mayan civilization to our planet, and there are reasons to ponder what modern science would look like today had it found its roots among the Maya, who went more deeply into the matter of time, rather than the Greek. As the reader will probably gradually find, the answer is that it would be very different. The science, which will emerge in this book, does indeed owe some significant lines of thinking to the Maya, with which we will be better equipped to understand the origin of the universe and of yourself. Thank you so much for listening till now. Please like this video and subscribe to Mindset Enhancer right now.